The night Evelyn Carter walked into her fiancé's penthouse with wedding cake samples in her hands, she expected champagne and kisses. What she found instead was her sister in his bed, and a murder plot that would destroy everything her dying father had built. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She hit record. Because the woman Dominic Varela thought he was marrying, that woman died in his doorway. And the one who walked out was going to burn his entire world down. Subscribe to this channel right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Evelyn had spent 47 days choosing between vanilla bean with raspberry filling and champagne cake with Italian buttercream. 47 days of wedding planners and seating charts and monogrammed napkins and every other detail that Dominic kept calling your department with a distracted smile. 47 days of being the perfect fiancé, the grateful heiress, the dutiful daughter, honoring a promise she'd made to a dying man. She carried the white bakery box from Delacroix like it was something precious. 3 samples, carefully selected. The wedding planner needed a decision by morning. Evelyn had texted Dominic an hour ago. He hadn't responded. That wasn't unusual. She used her key, the one he'd pressed into her palm 3 months ago, with a kiss that felt like a promise. "My home is your home now," he'd said. She'd believed him. The penthouse was silent when she stepped inside. Not peaceful silent. Wrong silent. Her father had taught her the difference. Marcus Carter had spent 30 years doing business with men who smiled at you while calculating how to bury you. Before cancer took him 6 months ago, he'd given Evelyn a single piece of advice that she'd never fully understood until tonight. "Baby girl," he'd whispered, "the most dangerous lies are the ones that come wrapped in love." She called out softly, "Dom, I brought the samples. The planner needs our decision by tomorrow." Nothing. She set the bakery box on the kitchen counter and moved deeper into the apartment. Living room empty, office dark. That left only the bedroom. And something in her chest already knew. She should have turned around. Should have called his name again, given him warning, preserved whatever she was about to shatter. But Evelyn Carter had never been good at lying to herself, and some quiet, traitorous part of her had been collecting evidence for weeks without ever admitting what it was building toward. The late nights. The phone calls that ended the moment she walked into a room. The way his eyes would slide past her like she was furniture he'd stopped seeing. She pushed the bedroom door open slowly. The scene hit her like cold water. Dominic's back was to the door. He didn't notice her. He was too occupied. And then he shifted, and Evelyn saw the woman beneath him. Blonde hair spread across the pillow like something from a shampoo commercial. Hair she had known her entire life. The laugh that followed was the worst part. Bright and lazy, and completely at home. A laugh Evelyn had heard through shared bedroom walls, growing up through skinned knees and broken hearts and the dark, terrible days of their father's funeral. Vanessa, her sister, her younger sister by 2 years. The one who had stood beside her at the engagement party and whispered, "I'm so happy for you," while hugging her tight. The one who had offered with tears in her eyes to be Evelyn's maid of honor. Evelyn's hand found her phone. She didn't think about it. Her fingers moved on their own, unlocking the screen, opening the camera, hitting record. She held it steady. Her hand did not shake. Later, she would wonder about that. Later, she would understand that shock sometimes looks exactly like calm. She angled the phone to capture everything. And then she heard it. "When do you tell her?" Vanessa's voice drifted across the room, lazy with satisfaction. "You're really going to marry my sister while sleeping with me?" Dominic rolled onto his back. "The wedding isn't about Evelyn." His voice carried a coldness Evelyn had never heard before. Not from him. Not ever. "It's about control of Carter shipping." Evelyn stopped breathing. "Your father was smart enough to tie the business up in trusts and stipulations. Evelyn has to marry before her 30th birthday, or everything goes to some distant cousin. And once we're married, once I have legal authority over the company, you'll have the port access you need." He paused. "Just like my uncle wanted." "Forget what your uncle wants." Dominic's voice turned to ice. Victor Salazar sits on his throne thinking he runs this city. He's a relic, Vanessa, a dinosaur. The real power isn't in drugs or guns anymore. It's in legitimate business, shipping, transportation, control of the infrastructure. And once you have Carter shipping, Vanessa prompted, once I have it, I'll have something every family in this city needs. Every operation moves goods through those ports. They'll all move through me. I'll make myself indispensable. And when the time is right, when I've built enough alliances. He let the sentence hang. Vanessa finished it for him. You're going to kill him. You're going to kill Victor Salazar. The commission needs new leadership. Someone who understands we're businessmen now, not thugs. That someone is me. His voice carried absolute certainty. And poor Evelyn will never see it coming. She's so desperate to honor Daddy's memory, she'll do whatever I say. What about me? Vanessa's voice turned petulant. Do I have to watch you play happy couple with my sister? Just until I consolidate power. Once Victor is gone, once I control everything, we can do whatever we want. Divorce her. Pay her off. I don't care. You'll be where you belong. The recording had been running for 3 minutes. Evelyn had everything she needed. She backed away from the door with the same careful silence she'd used to approach it. Through the kitchen, out the front door, into the elevator. She stood watching the numbers count down and felt the strangest thing. Not grief, not rage. Clarity. Pure, cold, surgical clarity. The kind that comes when every illusion finally shatters and leaves nothing behind but the unvarnished truth. Dominic had never loved her. He had never even seen her. She was a legal mechanism, a trust provision, a key that unlocked her father's empire. And Vanessa, her own sister, had known every word of it and chosen him anyway. Evelyn walked to her car, a black Mercedes that had been her father's, that still smelled faintly of his cologne. She set the bakery box in the passenger seat. Vanilla bean with raspberry filling. Champagne cake with Italian buttercream. She sat in the dark parking garage and watched the recording twice. Then she opened her contacts and scrolled until she found a name she had carried for 6 months like a card she hoped to never play. Victor Salazar. Her father had been careful about this. Marcus Carter had maintained strict neutrality for 30 years, processing shipments for every family without choosing sides. It had kept him alive. It had kept Evelyn sheltered from the darker mathematics of his world. But before he died, he had pressed a list of names into her hand. If anything ever happens, he'd said, and you need real help, not the kind lawyers can provide. Victor's name had been at the top. She had never asked why. She understood now. Evelyn stared at the contact for a long moment. Then she looked at the white bakery box beside her. She typed the message before she could talk herself out of it. We need to talk. Your nephew is planning to kill you. She hit send. Then she started the car and drove. Not home, not to Vanessa's apartment. She drove to the overlook her father had loved high in the hills, where the entire city spread below like something beautiful and terrible. The port, the shipping yards, the rivers of light that represented everything Marcus Carter had spent his life building. I'm sorry, Daddy, she whispered, but I'm not protecting your legacy by marrying a man who wants to use it to commit murder. I'm going to protect it my way. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Tomorrow night, 10 o'clock, the Monarch Club. Come alone. She recognized the weight of the invitation. The Monarch Club was Victor Salazar's territory. Walking in there alone as a woman who had just accused his nephew of treason required either extraordinary courage or extraordinary stupidity. Evelyn typed back, I'll be there. Another message arrived immediately. Bring proof. She looked at the video on her phone. 3 minutes of Dominic and Vanessa discussing betrayal and murder in the casual tones of people who had never once considered that they might be caught. I have it, she replied. The city glittered below her, beautiful and completely indifferent. Somewhere down there, Dominic was probably still in bed with Vanessa. Both of them certain that the obedient, grieving daughter he was engaged to would never see any of this coming. Let them be certain. Let them sleep easy tonight. Let them make their plans and count their advantages and congratulate each other on how perfectly they had played it. Because the woman who had driven up that hill was already gone. The woman who would drive back down was someone else entirely. Evelyn had spent her whole life being shaped by other people's needs. The good daughter, the grateful heir, the perfect bride. She had made herself smaller and smaller year after year to fit inside the space that men like her father and men like Dominic had designed for her. That woman had died tonight on the 48th floor of Dominic Varela's penthouse. The one who replaced her understood something new. In this city, in this world, her father had navigated so carefully, you either wrote the rules or you became a casualty of them. Dominic had made his choice. He'd decided she was a game piece, something to be moved around a board he thought only he could see. Now, she would make hers. Evelyn drove home through streets that felt sharper than they had that morning. She poured 2 fingers of her father's whiskey and sat with her laptop and spent the rest of the night learning everything she could find about Victor Salazar. The newspapers called him the architect for his reputation for long-term complex planning. He had risen to leadership of the city's organized crime commission through a combination of intelligence and calculated violence. He was in his early 40s. He had never married. He ran his organization with absolute authority, and was by every account she found utterly ruthless with traitors. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, Evelyn felt something she had not felt in months. Possibility. She pulled up her phone at 2 in the morning and sent a follow-up message to the unknown number. One question before tomorrow night. If the proof is legitimate, what happens to Dominic? The reply came back in under a minute. That depends entirely on how the conversation goes. Which is why I suggest you come prepared to negotiate, not just inform. Evelyn read the message 3 times. Then she smiled for the first time since walking into that elevator with a bakery box in her arms. She had gone to Dominic's penthouse tonight as someone's pawn. She was going to the Monarch Club tomorrow night as something else entirely. She didn't know yet exactly what that something was. But she knew this much. Dominic had assumed her grief made her weak. He had assumed her loyalty made her blind. He had assumed that a woman who had spent her whole life following the rules would never think to use them. He was wrong about all 3. And by this time tomorrow night, Victor Salazar was going to know it too. Evelyn finished her whiskey, set the glass down, and went to bed. For the first time in months, she slept without dreaming. The next morning, Evelyn sent Dominic a text that tasted like poison going down. Something came up with work. Need to reschedule dinner tonight. Tomorrow instead. His reply arrived in under 2 minutes. No problem, babe. Miss you already. She stared at those 3 words. Miss you already. The man had been in bed with her sister less than 12 hours ago, and he was sending her heart emojis. She set the phone face down on her desk and breathed through the rage until it became something colder and more useful. At the Carter shipping offices, she moved through the day like nothing had changed. She reviewed contracts. She approved logistics reports. She smiled at the right moments and nodded through 2 hours of budget meetings and told her assistant to hold all non-urgent calls. Her employees saw exactly what they always saw. Evelyn Carter, steady and composed, her father's daughter in every way that counted. Inside, she was dismantling Dominic Varela brick by brick. She pulled up every record she had on Carter Shipping's port operations. Every family in the city moved goods through her docks. She had known that abstractly for years, the way you know something without fully sitting with what it means. Now she read the specifics with different eyes. She was not just a shipping heiress. She was infrastructure. She was leverage. She was the single point through which half this city's real commerce flowed. Dominic had understood that. He had built his entire scheme around it. What he had failed to understand was that the asset he was trying to steal was also capable of walking into a room and making her own deals. At noon, Robert Chen appeared in her doorway without an appointment, her father's oldest friend and the company's general counsel. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and wearing the specific expression that meant he already knew something was wrong, even if he couldn't name it yet. "Sit down, Robert," Evelyn said before he could speak. "I'll stand." He closed the door behind him. "There are rumors, Evelyn, nothing concrete. But I've heard Dominic Varela has been having private meetings with people he shouldn't be meeting with, and I know that expression on your face. I watched your father wear it for 30 years. Something is happening." She considered him carefully. Chen had been her father's consigliere in everything but name. He knew this city's real architecture better than almost anyone. And right now, she needed information more than she needed to protect him from the truth. Hypothetically, she said, if someone wanted to form a direct alliance with one of the 5 families, what would be the consequence for how the other families view them? Chen went completely still. Hypothetically. Hypothetically. He sat down then whether he'd planned to or not. They'd be seen as committed. Every other family would recalibrate around that alliance. It's not a business contract. It's a declaration. Once you're inside that world, you don't get to step back out and pretend you were never there. He paused. But it would provide protection that no lawyer and no security firm can replicate. Yes, Evelyn said. It would. Evelyn. His voice sharpened. What are you considering? I'm considering my options. She met his eyes. Dad navigated that world for 30 years by staying neutral. I'm starting to wonder if neutrality was a luxury he could afford because he was a man, and I can't. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Your father used to say you were the smartest person he'd ever known, and that it terrified him. He stood slowly. Whatever you're planning, please be careful. Power in that world comes at a price that doesn't show up on any balance sheet. After he left, Evelyn looked at her father's photograph on the desk. That confident smile, that certainty that he had arranged everything to protect her. You tried, Daddy, she said quietly. But you built me a cage and called it a fortress. By 6 o'clock, she was home and standing in front of her mirror in the black dress Dominic preferred on her. Understated, elegant, the kind of look that said she knew her place and was comfortable in it. She did her hair the way he liked. She wore the perfume he'd given her for her birthday. She looked exactly like the woman he thought he was marrying. She drove to the restaurant and found him already at the table, relaxed in a navy suit, standing to kiss her cheek the moment she arrived. His hands were warm. His smile was perfect. He looked like a man completely at peace with himself, and why wouldn't he? As far as Dominic Varela knew, the world was unfolding exactly according to plan. You look beautiful, he said, and she believed he almost meant it the way you might admire a painting you were planning to sell. Thank you. She sat across from him and unfolded her napkin and smiled. How was your day? Productive. Really productive, actually. He poured her wine with the ease of a man who had done it 100 times. I've been working on something big for the family, a proposal I'm presenting soon. It could change everything for us. The irony was so dark it almost made her laugh. That's exciting. Tell me more. Can't yet. Still finalizing details. He reached across and covered her hand with his. But trust me, this time next month our future is going to look very different than you're imagining. You have no idea, she thought. I can't wait. She waited for her moment and found it when he asked about work. Actually, something came up. She set down her glass and let the right amount of concern cross her face. We've had some security issues at the port, unauthorized access attempts. The firm I consulted recommended I attend an industry meeting at the Monarch Club. Apparently, it's where shipping executives discuss best practices for protecting high-value cargo. Dominic's expression showed only polite interest. The Monarch Club. That's Uncle Victor's place, isn't it? Is it? I honestly didn't know. She let the lie sit comfortably. The security firm just said it's where these conversations happen. Should I not go? No, it's fine. He waved it off. Victor likes to keep his hand in legitimate operations. Makes sense he'd host that kind of thing. He squeezed her hand. I'm glad you're being proactive about port security. That matters. He had no idea. Not a flicker of suspicion. The man who had spent months constructing an elaborate scheme to deceive her couldn't conceive of being deceived himself. That told her everything she needed to know about how he saw her. They finished dinner with easy conversation about guest lists and honeymoon destinations. Dominic told 2 stories that made her laugh genuinely, which was somehow the worst part of the whole evening. He could be charming when he chose to be. He was choosing to be right now, and it meant absolutely nothing. When he kissed her goodnight at her door, she let him. When his car disappeared around the corner, she stood on the sidewalk and let herself breathe for the first time in 3 hours. Back inside, she messaged the encrypted number Victor had sent her a download link for. Dinner complete. He bought the Monarch Club story completely. The reply came fast. Good. Car will be downstairs at 9:45 tomorrow. Don't be late. She wasn't. The town car delivered her to an unmarked building in the financial district at exactly 10 o'clock. A woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and an earpiece met her at the entrance, assessed her in 2 seconds, and led her without a word through a hallway that opened into an unexpectedly beautiful space. Jazz playing softly in one corner. Candlelight and leather and the specific hush of a room full of people who had real power and no need to perform it. Evelyn recognized 3 faces from the news. A city councilman, a federal judge, a real estate developer whose name appeared on half the buildings downtown. She kept walking. The private elevator required a key card. The woman used hers without comment. They rode up in silence. When the doors opened, Evelyn stepped into a penthouse that made Dominic's apartment look like a hotel room. And there, at the window with his back to her, and the entire city spread below him like something he owned because he did, was Victor Salazar. He turned slowly. She had seen photographs. They did not prepare her for the reality of him. Tall, dark hair silvered at the temples, eyes so dark they were almost black, and currently fixed on her with an intensity that most people probably needed a moment to absorb. She did not take a moment. She held his gaze and waited. Ms. Carter. His voice was deep and measured, the kind of voice that had learned to carry authority without effort. You've made a serious accusation. Yes, she said simply, and I can prove it. He gestured toward the sofa. Sit. Show me what you have. She stayed standing. First, I need to understand something. If the proof is legitimate, what happens to Dominic? Something shifted in Victor's expression. Not displeasure exactly, something more like recalibration. You're negotiating before you've shown your cards. Yes. That's either very smart or very reckless. I've been told it's both. She didn't blink. What happens to Dominic? Show me the proof, he said, his tone carrying the quiet finality of a man who was not accustomed to being redirected. Then we discuss consequences. No. The word came out harder than she expected, and she watched it land. I didn't come here to hand you information and hope for the best. I came here because we have a mutual problem, and I'm offering a solution. But I need to know what I'm walking into before I put anything on that table. The silence that followed had weight to it. Victor looked at her the way a chess player looks at a move they weren't expecting, not threatened, genuinely interested. You understand who you are talking to? He asked. Completely. She didn't soften it. You're the man my fiancé plans to betray and murder, which makes you someone who needs what I have more than you need my compliance. Victor laughed, not a polite laugh, a real one, sudden and genuine, that completely transformed his face for 3 seconds before it settled back into control. Your father told me once that you had steel in your spine. He moved to the bar and poured 2 glasses without asking. I told him most wealthy, protected women never develop real strength. He told me I was wrong about you specifically. He held out a glass. I owe Marcus Carter an apology. Evelyn accepted the drink but didn't sip it. And Dominic. Victor settled into the chair across from her, and the warmth from the laugh was gone, replaced by something cooler and more precise. If your proof is legitimate, my nephew will face the commission's judgment. Treason carries specific penalties in our world. Death usually. Exile if I'm feeling merciful, which I rarely am. And my father's company. Ah. His eyes sharpened with understanding. There it is. The trusts require marriage before my 30th birthday. If Dominic is dead or exiled, the wedding doesn't happen, which means control of Carter's shipping passes to a cousin I've met twice at funerals. She finally sat crossing her legs with deliberate calm. My father built that company over 30 years. 3,000 people work there. I won't let it be destroyed because Dominic decided to play kingmaker. So what exactly are you proposing, Ms. Carter? Evelyn put her phone on the table between them, video queued up. Watch this first, then we talk about proposals. She watched Victor's face while the recording played. Dominic's voice filled the penthouse steady and cold, confessing the affair with Vanessa, laying out the scheme to use Carter shipping as leverage against the commission, describing his intention to kill Victor and position himself as successor. Victor's expression did not change once, but his hands tightened on the arms of his chair when Dominic said the word "old bastard," and something moved behind those dark eyes that Evelyn couldn't name but felt. When the video ended, he picked up his glass and emptied it. "How long ago?" he asked. "Last night. I went to his penthouse to bring cake samples." Her voice remained completely even. "Found him with my sister instead." "And your first instinct was to record it, rather than confront him." "Emotion doesn't solve problems," she said. "Strategy does." Victor refilled his glass and looked at her with an expression that was no longer simply assessing. He was looking at her the way people look at something they've underestimated and are now actively revising their opinion of in real time. "You still haven't told me what you want," he said. Evelyn leaned forward. "I want my company protected. I want Dominic stopped before he destroys what my father built and kills someone in the process. And I want to make sure that no one in this city ever looks at me as a pawn again." She held his gaze. "You need to eliminate a threat. I need to secure my inheritance. We can help each other. The question is whether you're willing to do business with someone who just walked into your building and told you no." The silence stretched long enough that most people would have filled it with something softer, something more accommodating. Evelyn let it breathe. Victor set down his glass, stood, and extended his hand. "You have a deal, Ms. Carter. But understand something first. Once we shake on this, you're under my protection, which means in situations you don't understand, you follow my lead. In matters of security, you trust my judgment. And you don't make moves that could endanger either of us without telling me first." She stood and took his hand. His grip was firm and completely certain. "Agreed. And the same goes for you. Anything that affects Carter shipping goes through me. Not around me. Not after the fact. Through me." "Fair enough." His mouth curved. "I think we're going to work very well together." He released her hand and moved to his desk, already pulling out his phone, already planning 3 moves ahead. "The commission meets in 4 days. That gives us time to prepare. In the meantime, you maintain appearances with Dominic completely. He cannot suspect anything has shifted." "I already texted him. We have dinner tomorrow night." "Good. At dinner, mention that you've been approached about attending a shipping industry meeting here. Make it sound technical and boring. He won't question it." Victor glanced up. "It gives you a legitimate reason to have been in this building when he finds out later." "We build the narrative carefully," Evelyn said. "Exactly." He sent her a download link for an encrypted messaging app and told her to delete their entire text exchange from the night before. Then he paused, studying her with those unreadable dark eyes. "One more thing. The commission meeting. These men have seen every performance imaginable. They will know immediately if an alliance is theater." He moved closer, giving her the full space to step back if she chose. "If we're going to make this believable, the performance has to be convincing. Which means, before we walk into that room, we can't afford hesitation." Evelyn understood exactly what he was saying. And she understood with a clarity that surprised her that she was not afraid. She stepped forward. "Then we make sure there isn't any." What happened next was nothing like she expected. Victor's hand came up to cup her jaw, and the touch was careful, almost impossibly gentle for a man who commanded violence for a living. He gave her every opportunity to reconsider. When his lips met hers, the kiss was controlled and certain, and so quietly intense that something moved through Evelyn's chest that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with the fact that for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was not performing for anyone. When he pulled back, his eyes had darkened. "That'll work," he said quietly. Her breath came faster than she intended. "Yes. I think it will." The charged silence between them lasted exactly long enough to confirm that neither of them was entirely sure what they had just started. Then Victor stepped back, the professional composure settling into place like armor. "Go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow dinner with Dominic. Play it perfectly." He handed her a plain business card with only a phone number printed on it. "If anything changes, if he suspects anything at all, call this immediately. Someone will be with you within minutes. You're assigning me protection." Starting tonight. Non-negotiable. His tone closed the subject. You're under my protection now, Evelyn, whether you want it or not. Something warm moved through her chest at that. Not because she needed rescuing, but because for the first time since her father died, someone was standing behind her instead of in front of her. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. This is about to get considerably more complicated. He walked her to the elevator. As the doors began to close, she turned back. Victor, why did you agree to this? You could have dealt with Dominic quietly. You didn't need me involved at all. He leaned against the doorframe, and for a moment his expression held something unguarded that she suspected very few people ever saw. Because you walked into my building alone with nothing but evidence and nerve, and proposed an alliance like you had every right to. The elevator doors began to close. Anyone who can turn a betrayal into a strategic opportunity is someone I want on my side, not working against me. The doors shut. Evelyn rode down through the quiet building, and somewhere between the 40th floor and the ground, something fundamental finished shifting inside her. She had walked in tonight as a woman with a problem and a recording on her phone. She was walking out as something else. She just wasn't entirely sure yet whether that was terrifying or exactly right. When she got home, her phone buzzed, the encrypted app, a message from the contact labeled simply V. For what it's worth, you impressed me tonight. Not many people manage that. Evelyn smiled in the dark of her apartment and typed back, Good. I'd hate to be boring. His response came immediately. Trust me, boring is the last word anyone would use to describe you. She fell asleep with her phone in her hand, the city humming quietly outside, and the absolute certainty that she had just put something irreversible into motion. 2 days felt like 2 years. Evelyn moved through them with the precision of someone defusing a bomb in slow motion, every word calculated, every smile a performance, every moment with Dominic, a test of how completely she could bury what she knew beneath the surface of who he still believed she was. He called her every morning. Sweet, easy calls that lasted 10 minutes and said absolutely nothing real. He sent her photos of honeymoon destinations. He texted her wedding song suggestions at 11 o'clock at night while her sister was probably still finding excuses to see him. Evelyn responded to every single one with warmth she didn't feel and patience she was rapidly running out of. Meanwhile, in the encrypted app, Victor was moving fast. Change of plans. His message read on the second morning. Commission meeting is tomorrow night, not in 4 days. Dominic requested an emergency session. Evelyn read it twice. He's accelerating. Our surveillance caught him meeting with Antonio Moreno yesterday. He's building support before making his move, which means we move first. She felt the floor shift slightly beneath her. Can I be ready in time? Be at the club by 2 this afternoon. We'll make sure you are. She left the office early, citing a headache, and arrived at the Monarch Club to find Victor in a private conference room with photographs and dossiers spread across the table. Jacket-off sleeves rolled to the elbow, already deep in the mechanics of what came next. He looked up the moment she walked in. Sit down, he said. We have a lot of ground to cover. For the next 2 hours, he walked her through every person who would be in that room. The Morenos, the Khans, the Russos, the Torres family. Names and faces and histories and allegiances she absorbed with the same focused attention she gave quarterly earnings reports. Victor didn't simplify anything. He didn't soften the edges or manage her exposure to the uglier details. He treated her like an equal who could handle the full truth, and she found that more steadying than any reassurance would have been. When you enter the room, he said, standing close enough that she could feel the gravity of his certainty, you will appear to be looking for Dominic, apologetic for arriving late, slightly flustered, and then instead of going to him, you come directly to me. The shock value alone will be significant, Evelyn said. The shock value is the point. In that room, respect is the only currency that matters. The moment you choose me over him publicly in front of everyone whose opinion he has spent months trying to cultivate, Dominic loses all credibility before he's said a single word. And then the video. Then I show them the video. You'll have already done your part, which keeps you slightly removed from what follows. His eyes held hers steadily. The violence that comes after his exposure doesn't need your fingerprints on it. She nodded, grateful for the precision of his thinking, even when the subject matter was what it was. What do I wear? The question seemed to catch him off guard for half a second. Then something in his expression shifted, a quiet warmth that didn't match the hard edges of everything else they'd been discussing. Something that makes a statement, he said. You're not walking in there as Dominic's fiancé. You're not walking in there as anyone's anything. You're walking in as Evelyn Carter, and you're claiming a room. They spent another hour running through the physical choreography of it. Where she'd stand, how she'd move, what to do with her hands. Victor coached her on the body language of that specific world, the difference between confidence and aggression, the subtle signals that communicated power without inviting challenge. These men read people for a living, he said. Don't ask permission with your posture. Don't soften the approach. You walk toward me like you've already decided, and the room is just catching up. And the kiss, she said. He moved closer, not rushed, not testing, just closing the distance between them with the same deliberate certainty she was learning to recognize as specifically his. The kiss needs to say ownership without desperation, partnership without submission. His hand came up to her face, fingertips light against her jaw. It needs to be real enough that no one in that room questions it for a single second. Then stop explaining it, Evelyn said quietly, and show me. What happened was not practice. She understood that clearly, even as it was happening. His mouth on hers carried too much heat, too much intention, too much of whatever had been building between them since that first night in this building. She kissed him back with everything she had, her hand pressed flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat accelerate beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt. When they finally separated, both of them were breathing differently than before. That, Victor said, his voice lower than usual, is exactly what we need. Evelyn stepped back and pulled herself together with the focused effort of someone who had a commission meeting to survive before anything else could matter. Tomorrow night, she said. Tomorrow night, he confirmed, and then quietly, after it's done, you and I are going to have a very different kind of conversation. She drove home through the last of the evening light, feeling the simultaneous weight of dread and certainty that came with knowing you were 24 hours away from something you couldn't take back. Her phone rang on the way. Dominic. She answered on the third ring. Hey, beautiful. His voice was relaxed and warm, the voice of a man who believed he was 24 hours away from the best moment of his life. I have news. Remember the proposal I've been working on for the family? I'm presenting it tomorrow night. Big meeting. This could be the start of something that changes everything for both of us. The darkness of it settled over her like something physical. That's wonderful, she said. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, babe. It means a lot. His voice dropped, turned tender in the way she now understood was simply another instrument he played when he needed something. I know this started as an arrangement, but I want you to know I'm genuinely glad it's you, Evelyn. I really am. She closed her eyes for 3 seconds. I'm glad too, Dom. Good luck tomorrow, she managed. Thanks. Love you. She said nothing and ended the call and sat in the dark parking garage of her building for a full 5 minutes before she trusted herself to move. The next day was the longest of her life. She went to the office. She signed things. She answered emails. She sat through a 90-minute call about port infrastructure upgrades and contributed intelligently to every part of it, while a completely different part of her brain ran through tomorrow night's sequence on a continuous loop. At 4 o'clock, Victor sent a single message. You're ready. Trust yourself. She read it 3 times. At 6, she went home to change. The emerald dress she'd chosen was deliberate in every detail. Deep green silk fitted through the body, falling to mid-thigh. Sophisticated, but not soft. The kind of thing a woman wore when she wanted every person in the room to understand immediately that she had made a decision. She paired it with black heels and her mother's diamonds at her ears, and left her hair loose the way she almost never wore it in professional settings, because tonight was not a professional setting, and she was done performing docility. The woman in the mirror was not Dominic Varela's fiancé. She was barely recognizable. Here we go, Evelyn whispered. The town car was waiting at 8:30. The driver said nothing the entire way, and she was grateful for the silence. She arrived at the Monarch Club at 9. The commission had been in session for 40 minutes. Through the door, she could hear the low undertone of assembled power conducting its business. The woman with the earpiece met her at the elevator, pressed the button without a word, rode up beside her without speaking. The doors opened. Evelyn stepped into a room containing 40 people, every one of them turning to look at her at the exact same moment. The conversation stopped. She let her eyes move across the room with an expression of polite confusion, playing the part of a woman who had arrived in the wrong place at the wrong time. She found Dominic at the center table, his face shifting rapidly through shock and confusion, and the first tremors of something else she was fairly sure was panic. And across the room at the head table, Victor sat watching her with absolute stillness. He gave her nothing from his expression, no signal, no reassurance, nothing she could have been accused of responding to. Just that dark, steady gaze, which was all she needed. Evelyn moved, not toward Dominic, not toward the empty seat that had clearly been reserved for her at her fiancé's side. She walked in a straight line across that room toward Victor Salazar, her heels deliberate against the hardwood, her spine straight, her chin level. "Evelyn?" Dominic's voice cracked through the silence. "What are you doing? Why are you here?" She didn't answer, didn't look at him, kept walking. Victor rose slightly as she reached his table, and his hand came to rest on her hip the moment she arrived beside him. Possessive, certain. The gesture of a man who had been expecting her. The entire room held its breath. "Gentlemen," Victor's voice carried without effort across the silent space. "Some of you know Evelyn Carter. For those who don't, she controls Carter Shipping and half the port authority in this city. She's also my newest business partner." The shock was a physical thing. Evelyn felt it move through the room like a pressure change before a storm. Dominic was on his feet. "Victor, what the hell is this? Evelyn is my fiancée. She has no business here, and she is absolutely not your partner." "Actually," Evelyn said, and her voice came out clear and steady and carrying in the silence. "I believe I have every right to be here. Carter Shipping does business with every family in this room. It's past time I understood exactly who I'm working with." "You're working with me." Dominic's voice had gone hard. "We're getting married in 3 weeks. Whatever business you conduct goes through our family. That's how this works. Is that what you think?" Evelyn's smile was cold and completely controlled. "That once we're married, you'll control my company." "That's exactly how it works. We discussed this. Your father arranged it." "My father arranged a marriage that would protect his legacy." She let the pause breathe. "He never specified it had to be you." The whispers started immediately. She could feel Dominic's composure fracturing in real-time confusion, curdling into something uglier. "Perhaps," Victor said smoothly, "we should show everyone what Ms. Carter is referring to." He gestured once. The screen at the front of the room lit up, and Dominic's voice filled the commission meeting. Every word of it. The affair with Vanessa. The plan to use the marriage to seize Carter Shipping. The intention to build enough alliances to make himself indispensable and then kill the man currently standing 6 feet away from him. The room did not move. Evelyn watched Dominic's face cycle through denial and horror and fury, while around him every man and woman at every table absorbed the recording with the focused attention of people who understood exactly what they were hearing and what it meant. When the video ended, Victor stood. "My nephew planned to use an innocent woman, steal her company, and murder me in order to seize control of this commission." His voice was quiet. It was the quietest voice in the room. "He violated every code we operate under. He betrayed family. He plotted against the commission. And he treated a woman of genuine intelligence and character as though she were a prop in his production. That video is fabricated." Dominic's voice had gone desperate. "She doctored it. She is lying to you." "The metadata was verified by 3 independent experts before tonight," Victor replied. "But more importantly," he looked around the table, slowly meeting eyes. "Does anyone here actually doubt this is something Dominic would do? Has no one noticed the ambition? The resentment? The way he has been positioning himself for the last 18 months? The silence was its own answer. Not one person in that room rose to defend him. Antonio Moreno, who had been meeting privately with Dominic just yesterday, leaned back in his chair and said nothing. The cons exchanged a single glance. Elena Torres looked at her hands. "I move that Dominic Varela be stripped of his position and exiled from this city," Victor said. "All in favor?" Hands rose around the room. "Enough of them. More than enough." Dominic lunged forward. "You manipulative scheming." Victor's security moved faster. Two men materialized from opposite sides of the room and had Dominic's arms pinned before he could reach Evelyn. She did not step back. She did not flinch. She stood exactly where she was and met his wild eyes with a calm that she could feel infuriating him more than anything else she could have done. "You have 24 hours to leave this city," Victor told his nephew. "Take what you can carry. If you're still here after tomorrow night, the Commission's judgment becomes permanent." Everyone in the room understood what permanent meant. "I have allies," Dominic spat, struggling against the grip. "You think you can just exile me? You have nothing," Victor said simply. "You built your entire strategy on the assumption that Evelyn was weak. You were wrong. Everything that follows from that miscalculation is yours to carry." Security moved Dominic toward the exit. His voice echoed until the door closed behind him, and then the room was quiet again. Victor turned back to the assembled families. "Let me formally introduce my new partner," he said, and his hand found the small of Evelyn's back. "Carter Shipping will be working exclusively with the Salazar family going forward. Any arrangements previously made with Dominic Varela are void as of tonight." Evelyn felt the weight of every gaze in the room. Assessing. Recalculating. She turned to Victor. He looked down at her. She reached up, pulled him toward her, and kissed him. Not tentative. Not performative. Confident and clear, and utterly unmistakable in what it communicated. This was a declaration. A claiming. A statement that Evelyn Carter had chosen her side, and her side had chosen her back. When they broke apart, someone began to applaud. Others followed. Antonio Moreno was the first to approach, his weathered face split into something between admiration and the specific delight of a man who has just watched an extraordinary play unfold in front of him. "Victor," he said, "I should have known the moment Dominic came to me yesterday that he was overplaying his hand. Nobody that confident is ever actually holding what they think they're holding." He took Evelyn's hand. "Your father was a good man, Ms. Carter. He'd be proud." "Thank you," she said. "I hope we can continue the productive relationship Carter Shipping has always had with your operations." "Absolutely." Moreno's eyes gleamed with the particular intelligence of a man already calculating his next move. "Victor's partners are my partners." They worked the room for another hour. Evelyn met each family representative with poise and precision, remembering every name from Victor's briefing, noting every dynamic filing away, every piece of information for later. By the time the crowd began to thin, she had shaken 24 hands and received the specific kind of respect that this world reserved for people who had just done something genuinely impressive. Victor leaned down at one point and murmured against her ear, "We're not done yet." She looked up. "What's left?" His expression was unreadable. "Someone is waiting upstairs who needs to see you." The private elevator carried them up in charged silence. When the doors opened, Evelyn saw her immediately. Vanessa sat on the penthouse sofa between two of Victor's security personnel, her usual polish completely stripped away, her face bare and frightened, and smaller than Evelyn had ever seen it. "Evie." Her sister's voice broke on the single syllable. "Thank God. Tell them there's been a mistake. I didn't know everything Dominic was planning. I swear, You knew," Evelyn said. Her voice came out flat and absolute. "I have the recording, Vanessa. I heard you. You knew he was using me, and you knew what he planned to do to Victor, and you didn't say a single word. I loved him." Tears streamed down Vanessa's face. "I thought once he had everything he wanted, once we could be together openly, I didn't think about what it meant for you. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix anything." Evelyn looked at her sister for a long time. She looked at the woman who had stood beside her at their father's funeral and wept real tears. Who had helped plan a wedding she knew was built on lies? Who had chosen a man's ambition over her own sister without a second thought? "You're going to leave the city," Evelyn said. "Tonight. You'll go somewhere else and build a different life, and you will never contact me or use the Carter name or speak about what happened here." "Evie, I'm not finished." Her voice was glass. "In exchange, you leave with your safety and enough money to start over, which is considerably more than you offered me." She held her sister's gaze without blinking. "If you ever violate those terms, the protection I'm extending ends permanently. Do you understand what that means in this room?" Vanessa looked at the security personnel on either side of her. She looked at Victor standing behind Evelyn like something immovable. She looked at her sister's face and finally understood that the woman she had always underestimated was not underestimating her back. "Okay," Vanessa whispered. "I'll go." Victor gestured to his men. 2 hours to pack. There's a flight at midnight." They escorted Vanessa out. The sound of her crying faded with her footsteps down the hallway until there was nothing left but silence. Evelyn stood at the window and looked out over the city her father had loved. She had just exiled her only sister without hesitation. She had destroyed her engagement in front of a room full of criminals. She had kissed a man she had known for 4 days in front of people who would now shape their understanding of her entire future around that single moment. And what she felt standing in the aftermath of all of it was not guilt. It was relief. Deep, bone-level, long-overdue relief. "Are you all right?" Victor asked from behind her. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I keep waiting to feel something I'm supposed to feel. Guilt. Grief. Something other than this." She turned to face him. "What does it mean that I feel lighter than I have in months?" "It means," Victor said quietly, moving to stand beside her, "that you just cut away the parts of your life that were poisoning you. And that takes a kind of strength most people never find." He paused. "Your father would be proud." Evelyn looked at him. This dangerous, complicated, surprisingly honest man, who had become the only ally she trusted in the span of 72 hours. "You keep saying that," she said, "because I keep meaning it." She kissed him again. Not for any audience this time. Not as part of anything strategic. Just because she wanted to, and because she had spent enough of her life doing things she didn't want to do for people who didn't deserve the effort. Victor kissed her back, like he had been waiting for her to make that choice entirely on her own. Outside, the city hummed on beneath them, indifferent and glittering, full of people playing games they thought they controlled. Evelyn Carter had just learned the most important rule of all. The only game worth playing was the one you designed yourself. They stayed at the penthouse that night, not because it was planned, not because anything had been decided or declared, but because after everything that had happened after the commission meeting, and Dominic's exile, and Vanessa's tearful departure, and the kiss that had stopped being performance somewhere along the way, neither of them had any interest in pretending that going home separately made sense. Victor ordered food neither of them really ate. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table and talked until 2 in the morning. Not about strategy this time, not about the commission, or Carter shipping, or the political fallout of what they'd just done. They talked about Marcus Carter, about what it felt like to watch a parent die slowly while still trying to be strong enough for them. Victor talked about his brother Dominic's father, who had died 8 years ago and left a son behind who had never quite figured out how to be loyal to anything but his own ambition. "I blame myself for that," Victor said. "I thought if I'd been harder on him earlier, more demanding, less willing to overlook the small betrayals, maybe tonight wouldn't have happened." "Or maybe," Evelyn said, "some people are just exactly who they are, regardless of what you do." Victor looked at her across the table. "Your father used to say something like that." "He said it about Vanessa." Her voice was quiet. "I never wanted to hear it." They sat with that for a moment, two people who had each spent years trying to love someone into being better than they were. When Evelyn finally fell asleep in the guest room, she slept without dreaming for the second time in a week. The next morning brought consequences, as mornings after upheaval always do. Victor was already on 2 calls when she woke up, and by the time she emerged from the shower, he had a summary waiting on the kitchen counter next to a cup of coffee prepared exactly the way she took it, a fact that shouldn't have moved her as much as it did. Dominic left the city at 4 this morning, he said, covering his phone briefly. Vanessa caught a midnight flight to Paris, both confirmed gone. Evelyn wrapped both hands around the coffee cup and let the relief settle through her properly. Gone. Both of them actually gone. She had expected to feel something more complicated about that. Instead, she felt the particular clarity that comes when you have finally finished something that should have been finished a long time ago. The messages had started arriving before dawn. Every commission family, every representative she had met the night before, reaching out through formal channels to acknowledge the new alliance and position themselves appropriately within it. Antonio Moreno's message was the warmest by a significant margin, which Victor had predicted with the precision of a man who had spent decades reading people. "He's already making his move," Evelyn said, reading Moreno's suggestion of a lunch meeting. "Accept it," Victor said off his call now and leaning against the counter, watching her work through the messages. "Decline, and he'll assume I told you to avoid him, which makes you look like an extension of my operation rather than your own entity. Meet with him, listen carefully to everything he offers, decline everything politely. And report back to you. Report back to me," he confirmed, and then added with the directness she had come to rely on. "Not because I don't trust you to handle it. Because I've known Antonio for 20 years, and I can tell you things about his approach that will help you read what he's actually offering versus what he wants you to think he's offering." She nodded, then looked at him. "What exactly happens now to us? To this?" She gestured between them. "Last night was real. We both know that. But real doesn't automatically mean defined." Victor set down his coffee. He gave the question the full weight it deserved instead of deflecting it, which she appreciated more than she could articulate. "I want you to stay," he said simply. "Not because of the alliance or the commission optics. Because I haven't been able to think clearly about anything except you for the last 4 days. And I find that I have no interest in going back to how things were before you walked into this building." Evelyn held his gaze. "I need you to understand something. I spent the last year shaping myself into what someone else needed. I am not going to do that again. Not for anyone. Not even for something that feels like this. I know." He moved to where she was standing and stopped close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to hold eye contact. "I don't want the version of you that performs for an audience. I want the version that recorded her cheating fiancé in the dark and drove to a Mafia Boss's club alone with nothing but nerve and evidence. That's the one I'm asking to stay." She kissed him. Quick and decisive, because some answers didn't need more words. "I'll need to go home and get clothes," she said against his mouth. "I'll send a car." The next 2 weeks moved at a pace that left no room for second-guessing, which Evelyn suspected was partly by design. Victor kept her moving, kept her learning, kept her sharp and occupied and operating at the absolute edge of her capacity. It was she realized exactly how he had survived this long. He never gave himself time to be afraid of what he'd committed to. She had lunch with Antonio Moreno on a Tuesday, in a quiet restaurant, where 4 of his security people occupied the surrounding tables with the casual professionalism of people who did this all the time. Moreno was exactly what Victor had described: warm, intelligent, generous with the kind of specific detail that made offers sound personal rather than transactional. Within 30 minutes, he had laid out terms for a port access arrangement that were genuinely more favorable on paper than what she had agreed to with Victor. "I want you to consider it seriously," Moreno said, refilling her water glass with the attentiveness of a man who understood that small gestures accumulated. "Not as a betrayal of Victor, as a business decision. You're too smart to keep all your eggs in one basket, Evelyn, even a basket as formidable as his. I appreciate that, Antonio." She used his first name deliberately, the way he'd been using hers. "And I want to be honest with you in return. Victor warned me you'd make this offer. He encouraged me to take the meeting." Moreno blinked, just once barely visible. "He told you to come," he said slowly. "He told me to come listen carefully and make my own decision." She set down her fork. "Which I have. My alliance with Victor isn't a business arrangement I stumbled into. I chose it with full information about my alternatives. That choice stands." She smiled. "But I genuinely hope this means the beginning of a productive relationship between Carter Shipping and your operations, independent of personal alliances." Moreno studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed low and genuine. "Victor was right about you," he said. "He said you were the most dangerous kind of person, the kind who doesn't need to threaten anyone, because they simply outmaneuver them before the threat becomes necessary." "I'll take that as a compliment." It was meant as one. He lifted his glass. "To productive relationships, then." She reported every word back to Victor that evening. He listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a moment before saying, "You handled that better than I would have." She looked at him. "How would you have handled it?" "I would have been less warm about the decline. You left him feeling respected rather than rejected. That's considerably more valuable in the long run." He paused. "Your father taught you that." "My father taught me everything useful I know." She felt the familiar ache of that. "He just didn't teach me this world specifically." "No, but you're learning it faster than anyone I've seen." It was 3 days after the Moreno lunch that Victor told her about the commission seat. They were at his kitchen table again, which had become, without either of them formally acknowledging it, the place where they processed the day. She had moved in 5 days after the commission meeting, practically rather than romantically, because the security his building provided made sense for someone whose profile had just shifted as dramatically as hers had. She had told herself that 3 times before she stopped needing to. "The commission voted last night," Victor said, setting down his phone, "while you were in your port operations meeting. They want to offer you a formal seat at the table." Evelyn put down her glass. "A seat," she repeated. "Full voting membership. First woman in the commission's 40-year history." His eyes were steady on her face. "I want you to understand what that means before you respond. It's not reversible. Commission members don't retire early or change their minds 6 months in. You'd be committing to this world, this table, this life permanently." Who proposed it? Antonio Moreno. She absorbed that. The man who had spent an entire lunch trying to recruit her away from Victor had simultaneously proposed giving her independent standing in the structure that governed them both. She filed the complexity of that away for later. "And you?" she asked. "Do you want me at that table?" Victor was quiet for exactly long enough to tell her the question mattered to him. "I want whatever gives you the most power to protect what you've built. If that's the commission seat, yes. If you'd rather maintain an alliance relationship without formal membership, I'll support that too." He held her gaze. "But I won't pretend I don't want you in that room. You've already changed how I think about what this organization could be. At the table, you'd have the votes to actually build it." "Build what?" "Something better than what we inherited." He said it simply, without drama. "The old model is dying. Drugs, violence, territorial enforcement. It's expensive, it's risky, and it produces diminishing returns. The real power now is in infrastructure. Legitimate business. The kind of operation that doesn't require looking over your shoulder." He paused. "You know that better than anyone at that table. With you on the commission, we have the votes to push the families in that direction." Evelyn thought about her father. About 30 years of carefully maintained neutrality. About the cage he had built for her out of genuine love, the one that had nearly gotten her killed by the man he'd chosen to keep her safe. "When's the vote?" she asked. Victor smiled. 2 weeks. We spend that time preparing you properly. Introductions, briefings, the political landscape." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "And if at any point before that vote you decide you want out, I will protect that choice completely. No consequences, no pressure." "I'm not going to want out," Evelyn said. "I know." His thumb moved across her knuckles. "But I needed to say it anyway." The 2 weeks that followed were the most intensive education of Evelyn's life, and she had graduated summa cum laude from one of the best business schools in the country. Victor introduced her to each family head, individually giving her the private context that never appeared in any dossier. He walked her through 40 years of commission history, the alliances and betrayals and power shifts that had shaped the city's current structure. He also, in the quieter hours, told her things about himself that she suspected he had never told anyone. About the first time he had ordered violence, and what it had cost him to live with it. About the brother he had failed to protect, and the nephew that loss had produced. About the version of this life he had imagined when he was young before ambition and circumstance had shaped it into something harder than he had planned. Evelyn listened to all of it without flinching. And in return she told him things she had never said out loud. About the loneliness of being Marcus Carter's daughter, admired and managed, and rarely actually seen. About the secret grief of an arranged engagement, the quiet surrender of her own wants in service of her father's dying wish. About the moment she had stood in Dominic's doorway and felt the last of her old self simply let go. "I was invisible for so long," she said one night, his arm around her in the dark. "I thought that was just what safety looked like." "Safety shouldn't cost you that much," Victor said. "No," she agreed. "It shouldn't." The night before the commission vote, Victor hosted a private dinner at the Monarch Club. All 5 family heads, their key advisors, the inner circle that actually ran this city. It was Evelyn's final evaluation before the formal vote, whether anyone called it that or not. She wore midnight blue. Victor had chosen it, and she had let him because he understood this room better than she did, and because she trusted him enough by now to know he wasn't dressing her to diminish her, but to position her precisely. She entered on his arm and felt the assessment of 40 eyes recalibrate the moment she walked in. Antonio Moreno reached her first. "You look extraordinary," he said, kissing her hand. "Victor is the luckiest man in this city, and he knows it." "We're both lucky," Evelyn said smoothly. "Though I notice you proposed my commission seat the same week you tried to recruit me away from him. I'm still deciding what to make of that." Moreno laughed so hard the nearest conversation stopped. "Victor, she's magnificent. Absolute blade. Hold on to this one." "I intend to," Victor said mildly. She worked the room with the precision of someone who had done nothing but prepare for this specific evening. Each conversation carefully calibrated, demonstrating knowledge without arrogance, warmth without vulnerability. She made no promises she wouldn't keep, and declined every invitation to speak against Victor or signal weakness in their alliance. Marcus Russo found her near the end of the evening when the gathering had loosened into something warmer, more candid. He was the one she had been least certain about, the old guard, the man who had built his power in an era when women at this table were simply not a consideration. "You've impressed people tonight," Russo said, his weathered face difficult to read. "Most new alliances overplay at these events. Try too hard. You didn't." "I had good coaching," Evelyn said. "You had good instincts." He studied her. "Your father used those same instincts to stay neutral for 30 years. You've used them to do the opposite. Go all in." He tilted his head. "Are you certain that's the right play?" "My father's neutrality protected him," Evelyn said. "But it also meant he spent 30 years serving everyone else's agenda without ever having the power to shape his own. I watched that kill him as surely as the cancer did." She held Russo's gaze. "I'd rather be present at the table where decisions get made than be the infrastructure everyone else uses to execute them." Russo was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once, the slow nod of a man who has heard something that actually changed his mind. "Tomorrow's vote is a formality," he said. "You've already earned it." Later, when the guests had gone and the penthouse was quiet again, Victor poured 2 glasses and stood beside her at the window. Below them, the city hummed with its usual indifference, thousands of lives moving through the dark. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I'm standing on the edge of something I can't see the bottom of." She was quiet for a moment. "And like, I'm not afraid of that the way I should be." "That's not the edge of something." Victor handed her a glass. "That's just what it feels like to be fully alive." She leaned into him, and he put his arm around her, solid and certain and present in the way she had needed someone to be for longer than she wanted to admit. "Victor," she said quietly, "I think I'm falling in love with you." He was still for a moment. Then he turned to look at her, and his expression held something open and unguarded that she had never seen on him before, something he had clearly decided to stop protecting. "I passed falling a week ago," he said. "I'm already there, She kissed him with all the weight of everything she had survived to get here. The grief and the betrayal and the fury and the slow, improbable discovery that sometimes the most dangerous choice turns out to be the one that finally sets you free. Tomorrow, she would sit at the commission table and vote as an equal among the most powerful people in the city. Tonight, she was simply here, exactly where she had chosen to be, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, that was enough. The commission vote was called at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, and Evelyn walked into that room already knowing she had won. Not because Victor had told her so. Not because Moreno had whispered it at last night's dinner. But because she had spent 2 weeks learning to read these people the same way she read balance sheets and every number was pointing in the same direction. The room held all 5 family heads, their key advisors, and one empty chair at the end of Victor's table that had a nameplate she still hadn't let herself look at directly. She looked at it now. Carter. Simple. Clean. Permanent. Marcus Russo called the session to order and moved through the formalities with the efficiency of a man who had run thousands of meetings and had no patience for the ones that ran long. Each family head spoke in turn. Moreno with warmth and the specific pride of someone taking partial credit for discovering a talent. The Khans with the measured approval of people who valued reliability above everything. Elena Torres with a sharpness that felt like genuine respect rather than politics. Then Russo. He looked at Evelyn for a long moment before he spoke, and the room got very quiet in the particular way rooms get quiet when the last holdout is about to show his hand. "I've sat at this table for 40 years, he began, and Evelyn kept her face completely neutral. "I've seen reforms promised and abandoned. I've watched new members arrive with grand ideas and leave the table the same as everyone else within 6 months. Change in this organization is slow, painful, and usually incomplete." He paused. That said, his eyes moved to Evelyn with something she was now certain was genuine. "I watched this woman walk into a commission meeting 4 days ago, publicly reject a man she was engaged to marry, and kiss his uncle in front of every powerful person in this city. Not because she panicked, not because she was forced to, because she had calculated every step of it 3 days in advance and executed it without a single hesitation." The room was still. "That is not a woman who arrived at this table by accident," Russo said. "That is a woman who decided she belonged here and made it true." He picked up his glass. "I vote yes." The relief that moved through Evelyn was physical, a loosening in her chest that she hadn't realized had been locked tight until this moment. She breathed through it carefully and kept her face composed. The vote was called, unanimous, and just like that, the thing she had been moving towards since she drove away from Dominic's parking garage with wedding cake samples in her passenger seat became real. Victor reached under the table and found her hand. She held it for exactly 3 seconds. Then she let go, because she was at this table as herself, not as an extension of him, and every person in this room needed to understand that from the first moment. Victor noticed. The slight curve of his mouth told her he approved. "First order of business," Evelyn said, pulling the folder she had prepared from the bag at her feet and setting it on the table before anyone could transition to other agenda items. "I have a proposal." Moreno glanced at Victor with a look that said she really doesn't waste time, does she? Victor said nothing. He had not seen the proposal. She had not shown him. He had told her to prepare something, and she had on her own terms, and she had decided that walking into her first commission vote with independent material was exactly the statement her first 10 minutes at this table needed to make. "Carter Shipping has the licensing infrastructure to facilitate legitimate pharmaceutical imports through our port operations," she said. "I've run the numbers 3 ways. Conservative, moderate, aggressive projections. All 3 outperform what the families are currently generating from street-level distribution with a fraction of the legal exposure." She distributed the analysis. The room went quiet in the specific way it gets quiet when people are reading something that is genuinely changing their calculation. Elena Torres looked up first. "These margins are real." "Conservative," Evelyn said. "I built in a 30% buffer for regulatory friction and licensing delays. Real-world performance will exceed these numbers once we're operational." How long to full implementation? Rashid Khan asked. 8 months for Phase 1, 18 for full capacity. Russo set down his copy and looked at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize as his version of impressed, which looked almost identical to his version of skeptical, but had a slightly different quality around the eyes. You prepared this before the vote, he said. I prepared it the night Victor told me about the seat. She met Russo's gaze. I assumed the vote would pass. I didn't think it made sense to wait to be useful. The silence that followed was the best kind. The kind that meant a room full of powerful people was recalibrating something important. The proposal passed 4-1 with Russo abstaining, rather than opposing, which Victor had told her once was his way of registering respect without publicly abandoning caution. She would take it. The meeting ran another 2 hours through territorial questions and revenue arrangements and the specific low-grade friction between the Torres and Russo families that had apparently been ongoing for 3 years and showed no signs of resolving. Evelyn listened to all of it, filing away every detail, learning the texture of this table, the way you learn a new language, not just the words, but the rhythm underneath them. When the session adjourned, Russo stopped beside her chair on his way out. Your father managed this world by staying invisible, he said quietly. You've chosen the opposite. Make sure you're prepared for everything that comes with being visible. I appreciate the warning, Evelyn said. It's not a warning, it's an acknowledgement. He patted her hand once briefly, the gesture of a man who had decided something final. Welcome to the table, Ms. Carter. Don't waste the seat. He walked out before she could respond. Victor appeared at her shoulder. You didn't show me the proposal before today. No, she agreed. It was the right call. He said it without hesitation, and she heard the genuine respect in it. Every person in that room understood immediately that you came here as your own entity. That matters more than any introduction I could have given you. I know. She looked up at him. You taught me that. They left the Monarch Club together and drove back to the penthouse through early evening traffic, and somewhere in the quiet of the car, Evelyn felt the adrenaline of the last 2 weeks finally slowly begin to release its grip. She had done it. She had actually done it. The thought arrived with less fanfare than she expected. Not a wave of triumph, just a quiet, deep certainty. Like a bone that had been fractured and had quietly, stubbornly finished healing. 3 months after the commission vote, Robert Chen knocked on her office door and sat down across from her desk with the expression of a man who has spent a long time deciding whether to have a conversation. I know what you are now, he said. What you've become. And I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Evelyn looked at him carefully. You don't approve. I approve of you, he said. I'm still working out how I feel about the rest. He paused. Your father operated in gray areas his entire career. He just never admitted it out loud to himself or to anyone else. You're more honest about what this is than he ever was. Another pause. I think that might actually be better. For the company. For the people who depend on it. It is, Evelyn said simply. Because I know exactly what I'm doing and why. Dad was always half pretending he wasn't where he actually was. That gap between pretending and reality is where people get hurt. Chen nodded slowly. He would have hated how right you are about that. A small smile. He also would have been so proud of you he couldn't speak. After he left, she sat alone in the office for a few minutes with her father's photograph and let herself feel all of it. The grief that never fully went away. The gratitude for everything he had given her. The complicated love for a man who had tried to protect her so completely that he had almost made her incapable of protecting herself. I figured it out, Daddy, she said quietly. Not the way you planned, but I figured it out. 6 months after the commission vote, the pharmaceutical import operation went live and generated double the conservative projection in the first quarter alone. The Torres family proposed 2 additional legitimate business initiatives at the next commission meeting. Even Russo, who had abstained on the pharmaceutical vote, requested a private briefing on expansion possibilities. The old model was not dead yet, but it was dying and everyone at the table could feel it. And for the first time in 40 years, the direction they were moving was towards something that looked like it might last. Evelyn was in a meeting with her port operations director on a Tuesday, when her assistant knocked and said there was someone in the lobby who didn't have an appointment. She knew before she reached the top of the stairs. Vanessa was thinner than the last time. Quieter in a way that wasn't quite the same as the frightened quiet of that night at the penthouse. This was something else. Harder one. "I told you not to contact me," Evelyn said. "I know." Vanessa held her ground. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to tell you something in person." She met her sister's eyes. "I've been in therapy for 5 months. Real therapy 3 times a week, the kind where they make you look at everything you don't want to look at." Her voice was steady. "I understand what I did. Not just the surface of it, the whole thing. Why I did it, what it says about who I was, what it cost you." She exhaled. "I'm not asking to come back into your life. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just couldn't live with you not knowing that I see it clearly now." Evelyn studied her sister for a long time. The anger was not gone. She did not think it would ever be entirely gone, and she had stopped expecting it to be. But underneath it, underneath the cold protective layer she had built over the wound of Vanessa's betrayal, there was still the memory of 2 girls who had shared everything once, who had held each other through the worst night of their lives when their father's breathing finally stopped. "Come back in 6 months," Evelyn said. "If you're still doing the work, if you're still being honest with yourself, we can talk." Vanessa blinked. "That's more than I expected. It's all I have right now." Evelyn held her gaze. "Don't make me regret it." After Vanessa left, Evelyn stood at the window for a long time. Victor found her there when he arrived at the office 40 minutes later, and without asking what had happened, he simply stood beside her and waited until she was ready to speak. "My sister came," she said. "I know, my security team flagged it." He paused. "What did you decide?" "To leave the door open. 6 months." She turned to look at him. "Is that weak?" "No." His voice was certain. "Strength without mercy is just cruelty with better PR." He tilted her chin up. "You're learning to hold both at once. That's harder than either one alone." She kissed him. He kissed her back. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small box. She hadn't seen it coming, which was remarkable, given that she had spent the last several months learning to read him, as well as she read anyone. He had hidden this entirely, and she understood looking at his face in that moment that he had wanted her to be genuinely surprised. Wanted this to be the one thing in their carefully strategized life together that arrived without preparation. The ring was an emerald surrounded by diamonds. The color of the dress she had worn the night she walked across a commission room and changed everything. "I know how we started," Victor said. "I know what this looked like from the outside, and maybe even from the inside for a while. A deal made in a parking garage with a phone recording and a bakery box." His voice was steady, but something underneath it was not, and she loved him for that. But somewhere between that first night and this one, it stopped being strategy. For me, it stopped being strategy very fast. He held her gaze. "I want to marry you. Not for the commission. Not for Carter shipping. Because you are the only person I have ever known who walks into impossible situations and makes them into something better than they were before. And I don't want to do this life without you." Evelyn looked at the ring, looked at the man holding it, thought about the woman who had driven to an overlook hill with wedding cake samples on the passenger seat and asked her dead father what she was supposed to do now. That woman would not have believed any of this. This woman understood exactly how she had gotten here. "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, and she laughed at that. A real laugh, surprised and full, because of course it did. Of course it did. They married 3 months later in a private ceremony at the Monarch Club. No white dress, no formal processional, no guest list of 500 people who needed to be impressed. Cream silk, and a room full of people who understood exactly what this alliance meant and respected it for what it was. Antonio Moreno officiated with the warmth of a man who believed in the specific institution of 2 powerful people deciding to face the world together. Marcus Russo waited until the reception was winding down to find her. He pressed her hand between both of his the way old men do when they want to say something they aren't certain how to frame. 40 years at that table, he said. I've watched a lot of things change. Most of them made things worse. He looked at her steadily. You're making things better. Keep doing that. He walked away before she could answer, and she stood there holding those words carefully, the way you hold something that weighs more than it looks. A year later, standing at the penthouse window with Victor's arms around her, and the city spread below them like everything it had always been. Evelyn Carter. Salazar understood something she hadn't had the language for when this began. Her father had built his empire trying to protect her from a world he thought would break her. What he hadn't understood was that the breaking was not the worst thing. The worst thing was the cage he had built to prevent it. The careful walls, the arranged future, the protective invisibility that had made her so easy to overlook and so simple to use. She had broken anyway. In Dominic's doorway, with a phone in her hand and a bakery box on the counter. She had broken completely open. And what had grown in that space was something her father had never planned for and could never have predicted. Not the dutiful daughter, not the compliant fiancé, not the grateful heir carefully staying inside the lines of what was expected. Something fiercer. Something that had survived betrayal by the two people she had trusted most, walked into the most dangerous room in the city alone, and come out the other side with a seat at a table no woman had occupied in 40 years. Do you ever think about how different things would be, she said quietly, if I had just texted Dominic that I was coming that night, if I had given him warning? Victor was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. And then I stop because it's not useful and also because it terrifies me. She turned in his arms to face him. Me too. He kissed her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth, the particular tenderness of a man who had stopped pretending that tenderness was something he needed to protect himself from. Below them, the city moved through its rhythms, indifferent and glittering, full of people playing games they thought they controlled. Evelyn Carter Salazar had learned the only lesson that actually mattered in a world built on power and betrayal and the stories people told themselves about who they were. You do not survive by becoming smaller. You do not win by making yourself easier to manage. You do not build anything that lasts by letting someone else hold the blueprint. She had been betrayed by her fiancé, her sister, and the carefully arranged future her father had believed would keep her safe. She had answered every one of those betrayals the same way, by becoming exactly who they had never imagined she could be. Invisible no longer. Underestimated never again. Evelyn Carter Salazar had walked into the fire and come out holding it. And she was just getting started.